And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris. And I'm your host, Dan, here with you today. And I'm glad to be back for another episode. I know last time we got to be talking about cycles and some of the importance of cycles and how they happen to us. They're both a physical phenomenon and psycho-spiritual phenomenon with what Kris was talking about. And if you're new here, we're going to be doing some deep trance channeling here soon with Kris. And I'm asking you to stay and check it out. There's going to be a lot of wisdom and interesting conversation. So, Serge, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I was just reflecting. You said you are the host of the show, and I'm the host for Kris. So we're
Yeah.
both hosting.
Yes. Yes. I think we both have many hats for this show. That's for sure. Uh,
Yes.
Kind of, man, maybe host isn't the best word. Maybe I'm more like the MC and producer a little bit. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. We are multidimensional beings, I hear. So
yeah, yeah. I know. I mean, you're definitely the channel manager. You're the YouTube channel manager and the channeler. So there we go. Everything, all things channel belong to Surge.
yes. Okay, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, so I we were talking a little bit before we went on the air, and a couple possible topics. So we'll see what Kris runs with. We'll go from there.
Well, we trust that you are comfortable.
Oh yes, Kris, very comfortable.
Indeed. And we thank you for your consideration.
Oh, thanks as well.
In keeping with the topic of cycles, you can observe as a physical phenomenon the cycles of nature in nature. You have in certain areas of the world, you have four seasons. Some have two, monsoon and not monsoon, or monsoon and just hot. But all over the world, you see different types of natural cyclical phenomenon. The seasons, for instance, the tides, and so many other, it almost boggles the mind. And yet, no one pays attention to their own personal cycles. We touched upon that a little bit last time. And we also taught or spoke about mental and emotional psychic cycles, how different things do come into focus and out of focus almost on a regular basis. And this is all based upon various belief systems that you hold. We have in the past utilized the analogy of a merry-go-round. So that comes around on a cyclical manner. The same horse you will see at certain intervals on a regular basis. So in a similar manner, you have inner or mental, emotional phenomenon that keeps coming back. Some people assume that, of course, they must somehow or other have a mental disorder or an emotional disorder or mental challenges of one kind or another. They may think that they have anxiety, and it is not necessarily the anxiety that is the issue. The issue is how you respond to certain inner triggers and phenomena. So it is an internal system that seems to keep coming back at you, and you have apparently no way to end that cycle or diminish it and eventually move away from it or have it move away from you. So people will then go to the doctor, the therapist of one kind or another, and get prescription medication, which can produce some severe side effects. And there might even be a trial and error system to go through various medications until you land upon one that seems to work for you for a certain amount of time, until it doesn't, and then you have to go through the system again. But all of these things are based upon inner mental and psychological events. Some may indeed be traumatic in nature, and this may take longer to resolve simply because it is so impactful. So you develop coping strategies to try and manage what is going on in your mind, which then affects your emotions and feeling tones. But the reality is, it is the feeling tones that are affected, and that affectation reflects upon the emotional and mental systems. And the clincher is that you have at your disposal various tools and resources to deal with these events, these inner events. But your social structure and your familial structure and systems only try to approach the external phenomenon by treating the symptom. The symptom is caused by something. So when you put patches on the symptoms, they change because they need to be addressed. And very often, when someone says that the source of the difficulty needs to be addressed, the person may think they have to be re-traumatized all over again. And that just compounds the problem, because this is not necessarily true. There are energetic methods that can function very, very well, that can help you move away from or minimize, literally vaporize the original trauma in such a way that anything resembling it in your life no longer serves as a trigger, bringing back 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years of trauma back into the present moment. One of them we have addressed in the past is referred to as EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique, which is very effective. And they do have sufficient body of research to show that utilizing certain approaches along those lines can be of great benefit. There are other systems as well that can be utilized. There are in Ayurvedic medicine several approaches utilizing energy points in the body, not energy centers, but energy points. They're different. Energy centers are often referred to as chakras. These are referred to as nadis. They are in certain parts of the joints in the body, wrist, inner elbow, and so on, that can be utilized to short circuit the flow of energy that is the result of the traumatic triggers that can flood your system with fear and so on and so forth. We don't want to spend a great amount of time on that, because many of these things are available online. You can look them up. And they need not involve any kind of indoctrination in any religious or spiritual systems of any kind. They are, shall we say, religion neutral. This is where it is most effective. They can be utilized very, very easily, and One of the most simple approaches is something you do, whether you are asleep or not, whether you are thinking about it or not. But once you utilize it on a conscious level, its potency becomes very, very evident. And that is breathing in through the nostrils, out through the mouth. Some call it pranic breathing, and there may be other names to it. But the main idea is to feed your brain and nervous system with enough oxygen to be able to bring back certain levels of vitality that may even have escaped you. Such a simple, simple approach can have far-reaching implementation and far-reaching impact into your daily experience. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, yeah, makes sense, and in line with experiences I've had as well.
Indeed. It could easily be said that a great portion of people, especially in the Western world, who have gotten caught up in the stresses of everyday business life, are very superficial breathers. They only breathe from the upper chest, never allowing the oxygen to truly go deep down into the lower chest cavity and the lungs, which cleans out toxins that have been accumulating in the bloodstream through poor breathing. Just that action alone, breathing first from the abdomen as if you are inflating a small bellows, and then continuing into the middle and upper chest on the same intake of breath through the nose, and then slowly exhaling through the mouth, and then continue the process at a nice, slow pace, can have, within a few minutes alone, an energizing effect on the bloodstream, because you would then be flooding the bloodstream with oxygen you normally do not give your system. So that alone can wake you up like very few things can. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I'm still following.
So even just that kind of a small thing can have a huge impact upon the rest of the day. And this is something you do not need to sit twisted in a pretzel in a sacred chamber and so on and so forth. You can do it while walking. You can do it while sitting on the bus. You can do it while sitting in your car. You can do it at home. You can do it at the office even. Just a few moments of that kind of deep breathing, it can really be helpful, but you have to do it. No one can do it for you. And the normal breathing, which is the upper chest, shallow breathing, compounds stress. The other kind of breathing we were just talking about helps to alleviate stress. When the individual is stressed out, there is a need for oxygen, and it is often deprived because you are accustomed to breathing so shallow. So changing that pattern of breathing can have deep-reaching impact, and the effects would amaze you. Just that alone. We have mentioned in the past as well that it has a secondary effect. As you take in deeper levels of oxygen, you also free yourself up from many issues that bind you. By that we mean emotional types of issues. It frees you up from that. So not only can you take an even deeper breath, but it connects you with Pran, the old Hindu system, the yoga system of energy, or Jib in ancient Egypt, because they practiced many similar things, they had a lot of communication. It could even be said that a long time into your past, many Hindu mystics traveled into Egypt. And we are speaking of thousands upon thousands and thousands of years ago, when the Nile was much bigger, with many tributaries that have disappeared and gone under the Sahara. Their yoga systems were, in some respects, quite aligned. So, all that to say, just changing the breathing pattern to the one we referred to for a few minutes, several times a day, will also put you in touch with a greater sense of energy from your greater self. You may even have the experience of just loving people for whom and what they are. It doesn't matter if they are poor or rich. It doesn't matter their profession, their familial background. All that it matters is that you are connecting with something greater than yourself. And this kind of breathing, not overnight, it will take weeks of building up to this, but eventually allows you to feel in sync with that greater field of energy. Some of you call it your inner self. It only appears that it is different from you, but in truth, it is your natural self. Does that also make sense?
Yeah, it does. And lately, I've been watching a lot of videos on mindfulness, and particularly what to do in the face of overwhelming emotions. And the first step is to acknowledge it. And then the next step is to simply sit with it, not try to make it go away or fight it, which I think is many
You mean
people.
a certain form of AAA?
I did throw that in there. Yes, the triple A matches nicely with what Zen masters say, actually, about how to handle these emotions. And the next step is to simply be with it, and in the presence of awareness, which the technique you're talking about with the breath and that particular type of breathing just brings awareness to it, and that's the way the response and and our internal focus dissolves, not by trying to make it go away, but simply by acknowledging and then sitting with it. It just
Mhm.
simply seems to not be able to exist when we bring consciousness and awareness to it.
And that is, in actuality, the proper use of the conscious mind. Not to try to coerce the conscious mind to function as the ego, because that too is maligned, but to utilize its properties to your benefit. And this process you described actually does that. The other way, which is the standard method of operation, mostly used by everyone, is to recognize the fear and try to squash it, try to attack it, get it away or get away from it, run from it. And the interesting thing with that last one is that the faster you run from yourself, the more you will catch up with yourself. You cannot outrun yourself, but you can turn around, face it, not in a life or death situation, but face it with the knowledge that you created this situation. You created the interpretation, the perception of it. And you have allowed that to become the reality. By doing it this particular way, you also acknowledge that the situation is not insurmountable. The situation can be put in perspective and resolved. A very interesting thing that Joseph has noted often when he's walking his dog, because his dog is not small, he's 55 kilo or 120-pound Great Dane. So it is quite large. In fact, were he to stand on his hind legs, he would be taller than Joseph. Now, there are people who are afraid of dogs. Interestingly, the proper way to walk a dog is with the dog on the owner's left. And walking along the road, some people see them coming and become afraid, and they will literally try to go on the left side of the dog, between the dog and the hedge or the dog and the wall, because they have a fear which only compounds the problem. Because then they become convinced that the dog will surely attack them because it is so close, but they deliberately put themselves in close proximity of the dog. Were they to walk on the dog walker's right side, where the dog is not, they would have almost no negative experience. But the fear is almost paralyzing. So it is a phobia because it basically short circuits the common sense to walk on the other side. Does that make some sense to you?
Yeah, yeah, it definitely clouds clouds our choices and perceptions for sure.
Indeed. So, in line with that, an individual recognizing some perhaps painful or even traumatizing inner event from their past can benefit greatly by utilizing their greatest faculty of all. It's not common sense, but it is the mind, and specifically self-awareness, self-mastery. And that can be utilized in such a way as to eliminate many similar situations, put them in perspective, put them in context, and move on. But instead, they bring it full front into their imagination, into their mind, and become overwhelmed. So they have lost that sense of perspective. Something far, something near. The pain which was far suddenly comes very near. Do you follow? It almost hits them in the face. It is almost overwhelming at that moment.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm imagining there might be people who just simply, without the fear, don't have a preference for dogs, and they may approach the situation of, oh, here's a dog. Oh, I'm gonna move, and without the fear response, they would just be simply and easily move to the right of the dog walker, and
That indeed,
yeah,
and that is evident from their behavior. And there are many people who love dogs, and they will also approach from the dog owner's right side and ask if they can pet the dog. So this is just a very small, innocuous little mm, mention, but significant enough because they use their imagination. Everyone, of course, uses their imagination. It is impossible to function without using their imagination. Even people who say, oh, I cannot imagine anything, they are convinced that they have no imaginative perceptions. They do. It just presents itself in another way. So they may not have a visual representational system, but they will have another representational system, most of which will be either hearing, smelling, touching, tasting, or variations thereof, which all plug into. But the visual system is more or less disabled in that function. They simply cannot notice that they are not utilizing it. They simply think it doesn't exist for them. even though it could be quite evident. So, one way or another, the greatest faculty of all that every single human being has is their mind, mindfulness, and especially the imagination. Does that make sense to you still?
Yeah, yeah, I'm following, and I know perhaps we're getting to the end of another wonderful episode, so perhaps some of those imaginative connections are something we can explore in the next one.
Indeed, we shall.
All right, thank you, Kris. We'll see you in the next episode.